Hello and welcome to First Post. Now, tensions are simmering in Nigeria as protests loom. Nigeria's Bola Tinubu government fears Kenya-like protests and has been warning and pleading in equal measures for citizens to not take to the street. But the anger among people has so far refused to die down. Now, for more on this, we have with us human rights lawyer and activist Inibehe Effiong, who is joining us live from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tensions have been simmering for days now in Nigeria. Anger among people against the Bola Tinubu government has only been mounting. Could you elaborate on the major concerns that Nigerians face today?
Nigeria currently is going through a very tumultuous and problematic phase. The current regime came into office on the 29th of May 2023, 1 year after Mr. Tinubu was sworn in as president of Nigeria in a very controversial manner, given the irregularities that characterized his election, even though it was finally affirmed by the highest court in our country, the Supreme Court. Mr. Tinubu is here to deliver on his electoral promises. The situation was already very terrible under the former regime of Muhammadu Buhari, who had ruled with an iron fist for 8 years and basically left the country in comatose. Under the Buhari regime, the economy was almost in a state of ruins. He had basically destroyed the economy. The inflation was already very alarming. Insecurity had ravaged the entire country, and people were being killed in their thousands across the country. School children were being kidnapped. The entire country was basically experiencing very terrible governance. So Tinubu came in, as I said, controversially, and rather than initiate policies or take actions to ameliorate the suffering of the Nigerian people, Mr. Tinubu essentially initiated policies that have only exacerbated the situation. The economy today is worse than it was under the Buhari dispensation. The exchange rate of the naira to the dollar is very bad now. Now it is going between about over 1,500, dollar naira to a dollar, and then it is also worse for pounds, and then that has also made things very bad. So the economy is very bad. Insecurity is still plaguing the country. There has been no effort at institutional reform. Unemployment rate has become worse. And then people cannot just continue to sit back and watch things continue to degenerate. That is why Nigerians, especially young people, are coming out to demand an end to bad governance.
Right, on that. Now, the economic crisis in Nigeria was triggered by measures taken by the Tinubu government. As you've mentioned, now fearing protests, we've seen the government is trying to placate the protesters and to quell the anger. They've opened jobs in the state oil company and they've increased the minimum wage. So the government does seem to be aware of its deepening unpopularity. Do you think this strategy could work in favor of the government?
Well, first and foremost, you have to realize that even though by official figures declared by the electoral body in Nigeria called the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mr. Tinubu, by the total vote cast, was not elected by the majority of Nigerians. He won by about 8 million votes or thereabouts, and there were two other parties, Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party, who had about 6 million plus votes. Atiku Abubakar, above that. Mr. Tinubu just won by, some thousands of votes difference. But it wasn't such a landslide. That is the point I want to make. So he came in already unpopular, and one would have thought that he should have taken into consideration the manner in which he came into office in determining the policies to introduce. But what have we witnessed? On the very day that he was sworn in, he announced an end to fuel subsidy. And that immediately, instantly affected the entire economy. Prices of goods soared, prices of the cost of transportation went up, and then the government didn't consider that these things were going to affect the populace in this manner. As if that is not enough, electricity tariff has been significantly increased by almost 300%. Cost of other things services have also gone up. And yet, the government now believes that they can stop people from protesting. Regarding the opening of jobs in the oil company called the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, now NNPC, Nigerians don't believe that. For most people in our country, they know that that is very deceitful because the NNPC has become a citadel of corruption over the years. Their jobs are not advertised. Their contract award process is shrouded in secrecy. There have been scandal upon scandal upon scandal. As a matter of fact, the Nigerian-owned state oil company has become the face of corruption in our country. So for them to come out publicly to say they're advertising jobs, nobody believes that because the real job that exists in the oil company and other important federal institutions are basically reserved for children of the political class. So people don't believe that. The efforts they are now making in an attempt to pacify the protesters are not really working.
Yeah. Just to interrupt, last time when the protests erupted in Nigeria in the year 2020, we saw the military intervened and that ended in bloodshed. Is Nigeria at risk of witnessing a 2020 repeat?
It is an interesting, situation. It is evolving. We just have to wait and see what happens on the 1st of August. The protests of 2020, the popular EndSARS protest that gained global, attention, only became violent after the government, the then dictatorial government of retired General Buhari, deployed the armed forces and the police to basically went on a killing spree. And as we choose to say, it was a massacre. And the government panel actually confirmed that there was a massacre. In Lagos State alone, at least for their own official figures, close to 100 people were killed. That is just in one state. So you had these mass killings across the country. And when the Lekki toll gate shooting happened on the 20th of October, that then made things worse. And that was what led to the violence that we saw. But the government is now trying to make it look as if the protesters were initially, from the beginning, violent. So we are hoping that this time, hoping that they have learned from the mistakes of the past and will allow people to express themselves. Because what is this really about? Under our constitution in Nigeria, Section 39 of our constitution gives Nigerians the right to freedom of expression. Section 40 gives Nigerians the right to peaceful assembly. And the man who is the president today has been a major supporter, protester, and sponsor of protests in our country. He has been against government when he was in the opposition. And suddenly he's in power today, and he believes that people cannot protest. And under the law, the armed forces has no role, ordinarily has no role in protests. But already we are seeing security forces, the military being deployed across the country. What that showed you is that we currently have a dispensation in our country that does not really believe in democracy. But this is the point I want you to note. The young people of our country have been pushed to the wall. Things are so bad in Nigeria. And guess what? The international community must realize this. As bad as things are currently, the Nigerian government is still dissipating public funds on things that don't make sense at all. For example, 22 billion naira has been spent to renovate or build a new residence for the vice president. The current government president is planning to use 150 billion to buy a new jet for himself. We already have too many jets in the presidential fleet. They're also planning to use about 5 billion naira to buy a new yacht for the government. So we have this continuous dissipation of public resources without recognizing that things are really bad. The common people cannot feed, people cannot send their children to school, and you are still throwing public money around.
And Inibehe, Nigeria's protests have been, as you've mentioned, inspired by the youth-led protests in Kenya, very much driven by Gen Z. In fact, even Uganda witnessed similar protests, but were soon suppressed. Do you think that the Gen Z-led protests could mark the beginning of what could maybe be considered the African Spring?
I believe that revolution is actually long overdue in Africa because our continent is plagued by, this gerontocracy. You have this class of old, ordinarily people that are supposed to be old and retired, but they have continued to impose themselves on the people across many countries in Africa. Look at Paul Biya in Cameroon. He's the only president that many people in my generation have known all their lives. Look at even the man in Uganda, right? Look at what is happening in even Zimbabwe, across many countries in Africa. You have these dictators who have held on to power, who have suppressed their people, who do not allow Africans to express themselves. Look at even Rwanda, right? So we cannot continue this way. And that is why I'm saying that I believe Africans are beginning to wake up. The protesting that we saw in Kenya ordinarily would have been very peaceful until President William Ruto decided to order the police to open fire on protesters, especially at the parliament. So in Nigeria, they are now making reference to Ghana. But as I keep saying, the Nigerian president does not need to wait until the protest commences before attending to the demands of the protesters. The young people of Africa have had it enough. They have been repressed over the decades. They have been subjugated. They have been denied of their rights. They have been denied of quality life, denied of education, denied of housing, denied of jobs. They are simply tired of old men that have wrecked the continent. And that is why you are seeing this trend, this new wave of political consciousness across Africa, where young people are beginning to take the power that they have, are beginning to hold their leaders accountable, are beginning to demand more, are refusing to be slaves in their continent. Because these leaders are stealing our money. They go to Europe, right? And go to America, go to the UK, and don't deposit those monies when their people are dying of starvation.
Right. And Inibehe, on that question of accountability, how could these protests change the future of political discourse in Nigeria?
You know the interesting thing about this End Bad Governance protest in Nigeria? What the ruling class in our country have typically done over the years is to use sentiments, ethnicity in particular, religion, and partisan divide to polarize our young people. If you see the trends on the Nigerian social media space, you will see some people sponsored by the government trying to make this look as if it is an ethnic agenda or as if this is just a partisan thing. But this time around, we are seeing what looks like a unifying rallying by young people in our country. From the northern part of the country to the south, both the Muslim north and the Christian south, the middle belt and so on, people are galvanizing, people are unifying to say that we want to change the narrative. We want to rewrite the history of our generation. We want to take a position for the sake of posterity to demand accountability. So I believe that this is the beginning. This might just be the beginning of a change in the political conversation in our country, because we have simply had it enough. Things are so bad in Nigeria. Things are just simply so bad that the national minimum wage, that even the new one that the government has passed, is 70,000. That 70,000 naira can barely buy a bag of rice in Nigeria. And that tells you what most families are going through.
Right.
Whereas the politicians are going home with millions and millions and millions monthly. And people are saying these things. So we have simply had it enough. That is why the young people are determined to change the narrative, to begin to hold their leaders accountable, to speak truth to power, to refuse to be intimidated, and to demand that the country simply has to change.
Like in Kenya, even the Nigerian government has hinted at a foreign hand in the protests. Nigerian police claim to have credible intelligence on involvement of foreign mercenaries. How much weight do you think these claims hold, or is it a strategy to smear the protests?
Again, I want to emphasize that this claim that some foreign entities or interests or mercenaries, organizations that are sponsoring are the ones that are pushing for this protest are simply without credibility. There is no atom, there is no iota of truth to these claims, because the reasons why people are protesting are basically domestic issues. I'm not aware that a single person wants to protest because of the foreign policy of the current administration. People are talking about hunger. People are talking about inflation. People are talking about lack of jobs. People are talking about corruption. These are issues that are internal. These are issues that everyday citizens in our country are going through. So how can they say that it is foreign entities that are sponsoring it? The government only comes up with these ridiculous claims in order to have an excuse to clamp down on peaceful and legitimate protests by Nigerians. So I want the international community to simply and completely disregard these claims. They doesn't have any merit. There is no factual basis to it. There is no evidence to back it, certainly not in the public domain, to show that it is foreign interests that are pushing for this protest. Nigerians have had it enough. Nigerians are hungry. Nigerians want changes. Nigerians want institutional reform. People are also asking for electoral reforms because of the manner that this current government came into office. It is important for us to have our electoral process sanitized. Specifically, we want to see the use of technology made compulsory in our elections. So how can they claim that these are protests or that this protest is being sponsored by foreign interests? It is simply a lie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Inibehe, thank you very much for being with us on First Post and for bringing us your analysis and understanding of all the latest happening in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. It has been my pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment. So thank you for making First Post 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
We start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to First Post America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.